Okay, so I assume a number of you guys may or may not be familiar with us. Mike and I started, obviously, the competition. We are working screenwriters, a number of projects in different stages. For those of you who don't really know anything about us, currently working on a project with Paramount and waiting on another project with a European production that we're waiting to get the green light, that they're just in the financing stages. So for Mike and I've been working as screenwriters, would say 5 years, 6 years. Moderately new, but obviously been writing a lot longer than that. This class we wanted to offer to all the semi-finalists, really just to say, to help those that can, particularly with 10 pages. Mike and I learned almost the hard way when it came to not really knowing anything. Funnily enough, I think the first instance we really learned was when we did a 10-page breakdown session at Austin Film Festival, when we were just starting out. And that was an eye-opener. We learned a hell of a lot in the process, and thankfully, as a result, we actually learned a little bit about how to improve our 10 pages and get it to where it needed to be. Regarding this particular class, for us, the first 10 pages, I mean, for anybody in general, for the first 10 pages are the most important series of events, of pages throughout an entire screenplay. And that's usually where the reader is going to begin their initial, any reader in a competition, in anything, is going to begin their initial evaluation of your script. So they're going to factor in your ability, story, and other crucial elements to kind of mark your work. So you basically have 10 pages to convince them that the film or your story is actually worth watching and reading further. The first 10 pages basically provides an initial basis in which to judge the rest of your story.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important to note at this point that obviously the goal is to get the scripts to producers and studio execs, and they run a very tight schedule. So it's impossible for them to read through a stack of scripts. So more often than not, they will, unfortunately, just look at the kind of first 10, 15 pages of a script and decide whether it's kind of meeting certain criteria. So therefore, only kind of like the best crafted scripts or the most intriguing scripts will make it past those first 10-page reads. This is also true of competition, labs, and development as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you take BBC, for example, we know for a fact from both experience and working with our coverage team that and I think they're quite open about it. The BBC, they actually were only required on their initial read to read the first 10 pages. And that decision is whether or not it goes on to a second read and it passes through where it'll be read for 30 pages. That is the barrier to entry pretty much across the board in terms, like Mike mentioned, competitions, labs, development programs. So this is often going to be the gauge kind of if and how your screenplay is read. We know from experience that the most seasonal or professional readers, and we have readers who are exactly the same, Mike and I also read or have read in the past, they're dependent on how they're introduced to the material, they are going to read it differently. They'll often pace read through scripts that they've already made a poor conclusion of in the first 10 pages. So the important thing is to make these 10 pages count. They're the only introduction you as a writer have to the reader and the story that you want them to follow.
Yeah, and I think in a perfect world, every script would be given the consideration like our hard work deserves. But we also need to come down from the clouds a little in our expectations, because that's not going to be the case. If the script hasn't identified answers to certain problems in the first 10 pages, it won't be read the same from there on, if they were even to carry on reading it. So now, today, we're going to go through a couple of the scripts that Chris and I chose at random. We're going to pick up points of things that work and things that don't work. Remember, it is important to say here, this is not a criticism of your work. It just gives an insight into things that could possibly trip up a reader. And the last thing you want to do when you are getting those reads is to lose the reader.
Yeah. We also tend to almost run off the cuff when it comes to a lot of these screenplays. Mike and I had a little bit of free time this week, so we actually went through a couple of the ones that we'd already looked at. We pretty much noted out some of the issues that afforded us a better insight, particularly given that the two of us were reading it simultaneously. I think it also affords you guys, particularly if this is your script, it gives you more of an understanding. You get two readers effectively for press one just for the first 10 pages. It's going to give you a lot more insight, and it allows us to have that discussion over both aspects in terms of what we're looking for. So hopefully this allows you guys a little more insight than you would just an off the cuff session. That said, if I mentioned, I think on email, if we have time after this, we plan on running for kind of no more than 2 hours. If we get to close to that, we still have a little bit of time. Mike and I are happy to go through another script, maybe one that we had already in the list. We can jump through, but again, only if we have time. So for the first script, I think we have the writer. Actually, we had John. Your script, A Nice Place to Visit. Just bring it up. Just going to share my screen. Okay, can we see that?
Yeah, I
can see that. Cool, perfect. So for the most part, we tend not to critique opening pages. That's across the board. These pages are usually not included when we do competition reads, or if they are, and then Coverfly actively removes the first page just in order to add anonymity to the writer and also streamline the process.
I would say though, just on that note, Chris, I know obviously now what the genre of this piece is, because we did our 10-page read through and kind of made some notes and things, and then we looked at the genre after the fact. So obviously we're not kind of skewed in any way by the log line or anything like that.
Yeah.
I would say though that knowing the genre of this piece, which we'll come to for those of you who do not know it, something's happened there, Chris. I think we've lost.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. That's actually a really nice title, John. I really like it. Yeah.
Is that still good?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just. Oh, sorry, I've got a section. Here we go. Okay, so we have two quotes. We'll go paged. We'll read through the page, and then we'll come back and give you guys some notes on it as once we've read through the initial page. Isn't it new what I'm going through? But everybody knows you've got to break sometime. Another night I fought the good fight, but I'm getting closer to the borderline. Billy Joel. They said all teenagers scare the living shit out of me. They could care less as long as someone will bleed. So darken your clothes or strike a violent pose. Maybe they'll leave you alone, but not me. Teenagers, My Chemical Romance.
So on that one, we did circle that. I do think they're really nice quotes. My only note on that would probably be to choose one. I think that it sometimes can be a bit off-putting to give the reader kind of a bibliography of quotes. I think that you're already setting the pace for something you don't really want to go down. I think that if those quotes really, really do touch or talk to your screenplay, I'd go for the one that is, leaning more, would be my only note on that.
Mm-hmm. So I don't make you, or I'll read this explanation. City Centre, Martin Rock, establishing afternoon. Snow is falling on the town square in a small town of Martin Rock, Washington. Aldo Carp, a thin and muscular young man, walks across the icy street towards an elementary school. He looks like he hasn't slept for days. Mysterious schoolyard, Martin Rock Preparatory. retaining wall. A short wall separates the school from the rest of the square. Aldo makes his way around it and sits down on his haunches with his back against the bricks. He begins to watch a clock located above the school's double doors. It reads 2:30 p.m. Aldo looks down at a collection of stones half buried in the snow. He smiles and focuses his attention on one of the larger rocks. The rock begins to slide back and forth in the snow. It starts to make larger and larger arcs until it rises slowly off the ground. Smaller stones begin to lift and they revolve around the larger rock. There is a sound of a school bell ringing and all of the stones plop back down into the snow, dissolve to school clock, 3 o'clock. The school's doors open to reveal, so just make sure you guys can see, school doors open to reveal middle schoolers pouring out of the building. First group of children walks past Aldo. Some of them look back at him with a puzzled expression and he smiles back. Finally, Chris, age 10, walks out of the school and makes his way down the salted front walk. Aldo gets up and approaches Chris. Hello, son. Chris stops and stares, his mouth slightly open and his eyes have widened a bit.
Okay, so first off, if you just keep it on that page, Chris. First off, I would say that the notes that we're going to be giving here in some instances can also be grammatical things and things like that, but it's just because obviously you guys have spent money to enter into screenplay competitions. You guys are going to hopefully be giving this to studio execs. You want your scripts to be as airtight as possible, especially those first 10 pages. So just keep that in mind when we kind of give some of these notes. So firstly, I actually really like the character description. I think the line you've got there, he looks like he hasn't slept for days. I think it works really well to describe the person. I think you immediately get a sense of that straight away. My one note on that section would be that I have no idea how old Aldo Karp is. You say young man, but that could mean 18. It could also mean 30. So if you just give us, in brackets, a kind of a broad age range, I think it would help a lot.
Yeah. With regards to the second section, marked with his back is against the bricks. This section immediately draws attention to the error. Obviously, grammatically is incorrect. And again, slightly further down, smaller stones begin to lift and it. These mistakes tend to this is not just this particular script. We have seen this in countless iterations of other screenplays. And
our own, just so you know.
And our own, yeah.
We've got 2 readers as well going over it, and all of the time we miss things. So sometimes that's where like even these type of classes type things can help in order to kind of really just pull out those little moments that you otherwise. I think it's because most of the time when we read our own material, we generally have read it so many times, we kind of just scan through it and it almost, expect the words to be there. So
I think the important element, there's a number of things, and I'll caveat this now. We'll mention this as notes going forward because I would say almost all scripts have errors. When it comes to errors, particularly so early into a screenplay, as we stated earlier, it's so important. These 10 pages are your initial reaction, are the initial introduction to the reader, to your material. There's nothing that throws a reader or detracts from the page faster than errors and glaring errors. I mean, I'm a grammatical what's the word? Monster. I don't know. Yeah, but and I'm very particular about it. I'll notice an unnecessary capital letter in the middle of a sentence, and it will throw me off the page. Be careful when those are simple errors to fix. We all know how difficult it is to write, and particularly to craft and create a story. The easiest thing when it comes to that, whether it's kind of developing your characters and working on the through line, the emotional themes, every other element of your screenplay, the easiest thing to fix are errors, particularly if they are glaring, and if not so, if they are moderately basic. I would say when it comes to the first 10 pages, they should be your cleanest. You can forego, once I'm in kind of first 10, 20 pages, I'm completely committed to the script, and it's much harder to detract me. But if you understand the perspective of a reader, in that they are reading screenplay after screenplay after screenplay, they are formulating an opinion, albeit, you know, whether or not that is necessary or not, it's what we all do. We all do the same. Unfortunately, those first 10 pages, and I think it's more important. We're not just talking competitions here, like Mike said. If you're sharing material with studio execs, they make a choice on 10 pages. We've had exactly that conversation with studio execs. It is almost unforgivable to have to litter your screenplay with the first 10 pages with errors, and the reason for that is nobody, particularly execs, and given the caliber, when we're talking screenplay competitions, is very different. Once you get to the next level and you're sending it out to agents or to Mike said, screenplay, development executives or studios or producers, they expect by the bare minimum that these errors have been rectified. Therefore, it also infantizes you as a writer, unfortunately, and it makes you look far greener than you possibly are, and it's unnecessary. So I would just say, and Mike, like Mike said, this is not us critiquing your work based on minute errors. It's just the importance of those initial 10 pages. Mike and I have sent out scripts, and I think John mentioned that he was 20 drafts in and still missed it, just on the chat. It happens to the best of us. I have found 30 drafts in a screenplay that was read by a studio and that has still had errors. And thankfully, in that instance, there were so few. I think they didn't even, they didn't miss it. I did, and we kind of overcame it. But at the same time, it is important, particularly in the early stages, to start preparing yourself. And like I said, most importantly, in the first 10 pages, to just kind of get that out of the way. So yeah, you can go page 2, Mike.
Okay. It's me, your Uncle Aldo. Chris doesn't seem to recognize the name. Your mum said it would be all right if I walked you home today.
I don't think I know you.
You know what? She thought you'd say that. In fact, she told me to have you call her if you wanted. Aldo pulls a cell phone out of his pocket and hands it to Chris. Go ahead, give her a call. It's okay, I can wait.
I've got my own.
Chris pulls out his phone, dials a number and listens to it. The phone rings twice before it drops into static.
Not working, right?
Must be the weather. Try mine. Chris tries the new phone with the same result.
Same thing.
Weird. Aldo reaches out and pulls his hand on Chris's shoulder. I know your mum said that talking to strangers isn't safe, but I am your uncle. You know, the one from Seattle. You know what I think? I think I want you to know that I think she's right, 100%. And you see, again, we've actually missed an error there as well.
Yeah, even we do it. Even we miss it. Yeah.
That's just to point out how easy it is to be done. So firstly, my note on this section is that I thought your dialogue was excellent, John. I think that it's very natural. I actually got a sense of it being a horror genre through the kind of creepiness of the exchange of Aldo. I think it's really good. I think that it's not easy to write two distinct characters and when they're talking, but you've done it very well.
Yeah. We will. So Aldo wraps his arm around the boy's shoulders. Besides, if I was some freak, would I be out here in the middle of everything talking to you like this? Chris looks at him for a second and shakes his head. No. See there? That's what I was talking about. Hey, and you know what, Chris? She said that if we got home fast enough, we could send out for a pizza or something, before the weather gets bad.
So you're my Uncle Aldo?
Aldo squeezes Chris's shoulder. That's me.
I want you to meet my Uncle Tony.
Aldo turns to his right and sees Martin Rock City Patrolman Harris, dressed in heavy weather gear.
Hello.
Aldo looks sadly at Chris. This is your Uncle Tony. Chris smiles a smug smile and nods. Looks like you've got too many uncles.
Aldo
We haven't have any
smiles
notes on
slightly.
that, so we'll jump on.
Yeah. A look of calm spreads across Patrolman Harris's face. He nods to Aldo, unhooks a small canister of mace from his belt, and empties the contents of it into his eyes. Patrolman Harris screams in pain and falls to his knees. Aldo grabs Chris's arm, and the sounds of police sirens can be heard. Parking lot. 3 police cruisers pull up in front of the school, and one of the cars jumps the curb. Police scramble and draw their weapons. Even more can be seen running across the town square towards the school. Extreme close-up, Aldo's eyes. A blood vessel in his right eye ruptures. It creates a fractured red line that crawls toward his pupil. Jump cut to retaining wall. A thin crack appears on the wall in front of the police cruisers. Jump cut to parking lot. Captain Chen steps forward and raises his bullhorn. Aldo Cop, please step away from the child. You are under arrest. Jump cut to retaining wall. The mortar between the bricks begins to vibrate and pieces begin to crumble away. Jump cut to.
Yeah.
My first note on this section actually is that we do not have an age for Captain Chen. Really simple, bracket it and just give us an idea of how old that guy is. Because again, it becomes a production thing as well, right? So when these scripts go into production, they're going to need to know all of these details because they're going to be casting for all these characters. My one point, if Chris, if you just go up a little bit.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
On this section. Patrolman Harris screams in pain. I was confused a little on the first read. Chris and I actually read this script through twice to understand it a little, or the first 10 pages twice to understand a little better. At first, this reads like an error. And I thought, did the patrolman spray himself? Especially with the next sequence on Aldo's eyes, I feel like he was the one who was sprayed. So I'm having to do a lot of work here, but I feel like this is a story of some sort of telekinesis. And if that is the case, I feel there are ways to convey that information in a cleaner, more concise fashion. So it's not a question, it's not a question for the audience, it's obvious to the audience. I think that for me, I was trying to understand what was happening here. Mm-hmm. And I think if it is a telekinesis thing, I think that there are ways to clean that up in these first.
Yeah, I mean, as Mike said, we read through it twice in order. I think we read the first 4 or so pages and realized that. And I think that, yeah, I mean, if John had mentioned in the chat that it sprays it into his own eyes, that immediately makes it a little more easier to comprehend, particularly given the way it's the way it's written. And kind of similarly, and this is the polar opposite in terms of grammatical errors that throw us from the page. But once we have to suspend our disbelief as audience members. If we are confused or something unnatural happens on the page as we are reading and it throws us, no one's going back. We're doing this for a session where we're happy to go back and reread this section in order to better understand and help you. No one else, the other readers aren't doing that. They are confused. They will continue to read. They may learn later on, but you might have lost them in your first 10 pages. And if you've lost them in your first 10 pages, that is going to affect whether or not they mark the script highly, whether or not they can the pace and attention that they give to the screenplay for the rest of the writing. It doesn't matter how good the rest of the screenplay is. If the first 10 pages aren't locked in and strong, you're not going to get the same attention in any capacity. We do it with films. We sit and we watch a film. You can decide in 10-15 minutes whether or not this is a film you want to be watching. It's exactly the same as a screenplay, and the screenplay is the blueprint of a film. So it's important, like Mike said, to not detract from the story and make sure that you fix errors. And this is not a difficult. It's not a difficult fix, like we'd said, and suggesting it there. He sprays in his own eyes. I think some of it stemmed from the complicated errors in the initial pages, the first 2 pages. I think it was the first or second page, that had errors about the floating stones and bricks, or floating stones. Kind of was a little more difficult to read that first section, and that didn't necessarily come across as telekinesis as well. perhaps, you know, a set of straining eyes or some element that gives us this notion. I mean, we tend not to give prescriptive notes in terms of how you should fix it. I think for us, the best way to give notes, and Mike and I have taught classes on how to give notes, is to be responsive and how you responded to the material. So when we're discussing how we responded to it, it was that this threw us with it, and we're not even at page 5 at this point, and we're already thrown from the story and we're confused. And as a reader that's confused, it's hurting you as the writer, knowing that your readers aren't on the same page as you.
I would say on that note as well, Chris, I think that it might be helpful. I don't know how much you've managed to find other scripts that are kind of dealing with these type of genre tropes of telekinesis and things like that. And by the way, if I'm completely wrong on that, I'm sorry. That's just kind of what I'm thinking this is about. But if you can find other scripts that touch on those same subjects, I think that you can find out how they conveyed that information and how clean that information was conveyed to you reading it. And I think that it's not a case of reading those scripts and kind of copying what they're doing. It's understanding what they do. It's in the same way that we're going to go over at the end of the class a professional screenplay of 10 pages and show what it does right and why it does things right, more importantly.
Yeah.
I think that if you could maybe look at a script like there was that one with Michael B. Jordan, Chris, with the kids.
Yes.
I don't know if you can find that script, but
yeah, you should be able to. Yeah. Max wrote it.
Max Landis, was it?
Max Landis. Yeah. God, it's gone out of my head now. But yes, that's a great version. A great example of that.
That would be a good example of a script that could maybe help you understand how to kind of convey that information.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on, Chris.
So parking lot. Officers begin cautiously approach Aldo.
You actually did have a point above about the police cruisers, I think. On the page, you had a page on page 4. Go on.
Oh yes, sorry. Parking lot. Yes, because the police cruisers. Sorry, this was true. Yeah. So the police cruisers pull up in front of the school, and one of the cars jumps the curb. I was thrown by this, perhaps not so much Mike. I was thrown by this in terms of where the passing of time was through this particular section. The police cruisers and sirens seem to appear from nowhere, and almost all of a sudden, just as Aldo grabs Chris's arm. So my question was, as a reader, is where have they been the whole time, and who alerted them? And so as a reader, I'm required, again, suspending my disbelief, that this seems a touch far from reality. That, or I'm completely wrong, and in this scenario they've already been looking for Chris. I'm just confused as to how they've just found him in this particular instance. How it happens so immediately, and then all of a sudden all of these police cruisers appear. So again, just an element of story that threw me. Yeah,
on that point though, it is perfectly fine if you want your reader to suspend belief for a moment. Last night I watched Fast 9, the new Fast and Furious film, and they sent a car into space. So there are ridiculous things that happen in screenplays, but obviously they're self-aware of that. If this particular film you're going for is tone and genre and everything style leading towards wanting a sense of realism to it, then in this instance I think Chris is right. I think that having an understanding that the police cars just don't suddenly appear like that because it feels very contrived, I think that you have to maybe find a more kind of seamless way to get them.
Yeah.
Page 5.
Yeah, it's a page 5. Oh, sorry, the film was Chronicle. That was it. Max Landis. If you haven't read that, I'd grab the script for that. I think it's available. But it's definitely one worth watching, having a go through.
Parking lot. Officers begin to cautiously approach Aldo and Chris. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you might say can jump cut to front walk. Chris stands transfixed. He looks up at Aldo, who looks like he is crying blood from one eye. Jump cut to retaining wall. One of the bricks breaks free and hurtles toward the cruiser. Jump cut to parking lot. Captain Chen ducks behind his car door and brick smashes through the window above him. Jump cut to retaining wall. More brick begin to tear themselves away from the wall and fly towards the police cars. Within moments, the entire wall explodes. Jump cut 2, parking lot. Shards of brick begin striking cops like darts in a sick bar game. Several of them fall immediately as others shout and drop to the ground. Jump cut 2, front walk. Aldo ruffles the hair on Chris's head and smiles at him. One thing I will say on that page, Chris, before you jump in.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to jump back to the highlights section.
Yeah, I really like the pacing of that section. I think that you've got a lot of action. I'm not sure we need jump cut 2, jump cut 2, jump cut 2, unless you are a director, John, and this is something you want to do yourself. I think you could probably.
I think so. Every cut is a jump cut.
Yeah.
The moment we make a choice to jump cut to a section, and we can have them every so often. However, it's inferred once we say I'm jump cutting to this, unless there's given reason in that moment. The forcible nature of that particular element. I kind of understand in this scenario you've got a lot going on. You want to add you want to add some level of tension or perhaps action to the.
I do think on that point, Chris. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
I've read, for instance, Tarantino. One of the things he does is he'll have maybe a line in the action that will literally state that this section will read like, bang, bang, bang action. So I think you could even write something like that, John, and actually you'll pull your page count right down, and everything here will be a lot cleaner in terms of not having all the cut to.
But likewise, if it's a jump cut here and there, it's not an issue. I think when it becomes jump cut, it's important to just kind of trim the unnecessary jumps. And likewise, unless of course it's a visual decision, for example, smash cut to, or this image morphs into, I think if it's a visual choice or stylistic approach, it can work, and it can. But jump cut is almost a generic cut. I mean, we assume jump infers, speeding up of time, but any cut is rapid. So I don't necessarily, I think it does detract a little bit from the elements that you're trying to do, particularly if you're the reader and you're reading jump cut every single time. Actually fast paced action tends to come a lot quicker. So, Captain Chen ducks behind a door, a brick smashes through the window. More bricks begin to fly and tear themselves away from the wall, fly towards police cars. But reading it like that is a much faster approach, particularly for the reader, and it keeps you interested because you're beat to beat in those moments.
Especially because when I mentioned about the pacing, your action lines are so succinct here that it would work really well for what Chris is describing as well. We're not talking about text that's going to put the reader off. It's going to be action line.
I'm a fan of the slug lines that don't necessarily have interior living room or exterior parking lot continuous. I get what you're trying to do with it, but because you already have a slug line, you don't need to thrust jump cut to. You can actually say parking lot. We can just use parking lot. Retaining wall back to parking lot. We can actually move it that way because you have a slug line. So I would just focus on using it in that fashion. So what else? In terms of I'm not going to dwell on them. More brick begin to tear themselves away, obviously, as an error. Mike and I just highlighted it. I would just fix them. They're simple fixes, but we won't dwell on the errors here and there.
Yeah. I highlighted striking cops like darts in a sick bar game because I love that line. I think that it's a really nice descriptive line. And I think anytime a writer does that, I think you show your quality as a writer because you're using a really nice image there, nice simile. I think it's really a really nice line. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean those elements are what craft your voice, and so you're always looking as a reader for lines like that show the writer has their own voice. They create visual images through a single sentence. So like Mike said, it's a great line, but it is also a strong visual line, and that's what we're always looking for because it jumps out the page at us. No pizza for you, Chris's eyes glaze over and he collapses. He twitches for a few moments and then appears to stop breathing. Aldo turns and starts to walk away. He slowly begins to trot towards the side of the school. As Lieutenant Paul Lomis runs up to Chris, is laying in the snow. Chris, Lomis shakes the boy's shoulders lightly. Oh God, he reaches down and checks Chris's pulse. Please God, Lomis picks the boy off the ground and hands him to another officer before he starts running after Aldo. Side of the school moments later, as Aldo rounds the side of the building, Patrolman Crowley appears in front of him with his gun drawn. Don't move, please, man, just don't move. Aldo smiles pleasantly at Patrolman Crowley. Crowley turns his gun back on himself and fires. He falls backward onto the sidewalk. Aldo steps over Crowley's body and then stops to think for a moment. He takes the bag off his shoulder and flings it high onto the roof of the four-story schoolhouse, top of stairwell. Aldo begins to make his way down the snow-filled stairwell. His feet move quickly down the stairs, narrowly missing small patches of ice, until his luck eventually runs out. So again, the era Paul Lomis runs up to Chris is laying in the snow. Didn't make sense, that sentence. Another instance that threw me. I think when there's a consistent error, it's one thing to have, and I think that's the important element of it. When there are consistent errors, it's going to throw the reader page to page, and particularly in the first 10 pages.
On a separate note, obviously, you said you probably fix it, John, but again, Patrolman Crowley and Paul Lomis do not have ages here as well.
Yeah, I think it's important. We've seen great scripts, they don't give ages, but those are characters we are well aware we will never see again. Yeah. You are making a choice here, Patrolman Crowley, you're giving him a surname. He's not a patrolman. Therefore, I assume we're going to see him again, in which case we need to know what potentially we need to, dependent on his involvement in the story as a whole, we want to know what he looks like, but by the very least, we want to know how old he is.
Can you just go to the bottom of the page as well, Chris? Sorry.
Yeah.
That part there, Crowley turns his gun back on himself and fires. He falls backwards on the sidewalk. Aldo steps over the Crowley's body. That was the moment that Chris and I realized, reading it back through again, that this was obviously Aldo is using his mind to do these things. So that is brilliant. That how you crafted that is what you want to be doing in the first pages. Get that same effect for the readers, that we instantly know what you as the writer are trying to convey.
Yeah.
Run through the page. Okay, he loses his balance and he falls forward. His head connects hard with the handrail. Aldo bounces off it and flips sideways down the stairs. Jump cut 2. Bottom of stairwell. Aldo lands in a crumpled heap onto the icy landing. He turns over and winces in pain. Aldo blinks back, the snow falling on his eyes. He can see his blood on the handrail. Blood. God, that's going to leave a mark. I tried, Mum. I did. Went and sprung a damn trap, didn't I? Top of stairwell. Lomis, now armed with a high-powered rifle, takes his position at the top of the stairwell. He fires. Bottom of stairwell. A tranquilizer dart appears in Aldo's neck, and a look of serenity crosses his face. Damn if I didn't trap my... Aldo's face relaxes and he slides into sleep. Okay, there we go. As Lomis starts down the stairs, more police make their way down a nearby hill. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question? Lomis reaches Aldo and stands above him. Okay, so on this page, my note, Chris, if you want to scroll on.
Sorry, yeah.
The dialogue, Aldo talking to himself. I know I'm a terrible actor, so I didn't do it justice, but it did to me feel a little bit on the nose. Yeah, I think especially considering it's not something we've seen in the beginning of the script, and we're now, what is this, page 7, is it, Chris? Page 7, yeah.
Page 7.
Yeah, it's just a bit strange to have a character talking to himself. I think unless that's something he's going to be doing continuously, I don't know because I haven't read beyond page 10, it just threw me a little bit. The next note I had...
Well, actually, I'll stop you, Mike, just quick, sorry. So I noticed we had this note and we discussed this. And I think this actually further clarifies the requirement for certain slug lines. This is the third time we've read it. And having read this for a third time, I now understand we're on the outside of the school on an external stairwell. I think when we read this, we assumed it was an internal stairwell because it basically said stairwell. So we assumed he'd gone inside, I think, at some point. That's the danger of not formulating. I mean, we can jump to top of stairwell, bottom of stairwell once we've set the location or we've moved to a new location, but we really need to be continuous with it. So I think the first time, for example, in that I would add, exterior stairwell side of school, for example.
Okay. So you
by that point, we can go.
I still didn't pick up on the tweet.
Yeah, see, and by that point we can go back and say, okay, well, actually now we know where we're supposed to be. The first time we actually reach this new location, but to just jump, it confuses us, and we have no idea.
And I'll be honest,
inside or outside.
A lot of time when I read scripts or when friends send them other writers, I don't necessarily read, like obviously like we are here, every single slug line, but the fact that you almost kind of know when it says internal, external, you kind of get a sense of where you are. You don't read them because you end up it ruins the flow a little bit, I find anyway. Which is why I think so many writers like you, John, have now gone to this point of losing them entirely, because it is a little bit archaic, I think. But my first read on this, I was thinking, we're in the stairwell, and why am I seeing a hill? And where's the window? And so you just threw me a little bit, but I didn't even pick up.
Yeah, thankfully I never recognized it this time. But again, like I said, third time we've read through this and we're now seeing it. That means possibly the first 2 or 3 readers that you've had, if you're getting through rounds, it may be that the first 2 readers completely miss it, and it may be the third reader. I can't remember exactly where your script placed in the competition, but it might mean the difference between not making it to the next round or not placing on a particular level of the list, because it might just be that next reader just doesn't get it. Mike and I always say when we run screenplay competitions, when we run screenplay classes and writing classes, the importance of conveying as much information as we can in a shorter time frame as we can, but also that we don't make errors along the way that are going to throw those readers, because it is so important. So we'll jump to the next page. Lauren, that depends on the question. Sorry, this is right. That depends on the question, Mr. Anderson. The snow begins to fall heavier around them. Aldo's eyes open slightly. The last thing he sees is Lamista's smile.
What, in your opinion, makes a good serial killer?
Video screen, CNN interview. Split screen with CNN reporter Anderson Cooper on one side and Lauren Thompson on the other. She is speaking from the study located in her home in Lakewood, Washington. Excuse me?
I'm just curious, since you have encountered a few.
One.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the one that ended your child's life, the cardboard killer.
Please, Mr. Cooper. Anderson, I didn't come on here to glorify a serial killer.
You came on because of your book, Mind Games, The Pursuit of Richard Glenn, correct?
That's true. So again, actually, we did it now because I was confused with the lines, having jumped to the next page. Granted, we've taken a break momentarily to discuss some of the notes. This feels like a lot of off-screen dialogue before we go into the next scene. We don't know the characters that are talking. We haven't met them yet. And so one line would suffice as a nice piece of connective tissue between the scenes. And this entire exchange could be confused, honestly, for a narration sequence. Often what we find, particularly in examples like this, is the Anderson Cooper line may be off screen, will stay there, and then we'll come back. And perhaps I would just shift I would even just consider the initial, if you want to have an overlap, which we understand and is a storytelling technique regardless, and it works, and it has worked, and there's a reason it's a trope and so many people use it. I would say stick to one line, continue the rest of the scene as you were playing out, but we know no one is speaking anyway as it's off screen, but the element of off screen, and we have so much dialogue from two characters we have yet to meet. We're flooding our heads with confusion and questions over who these two new characters are, that we're not even still in the same scene, and it's throwing us from the visuals of that scene.
Not to mention, I do also read it in thinking of how this would be as a viewer. And I know that moment you want there to be, Aldo, his eyes open slightly, the last thing he sees is a smile, and you want this to be like a touching moment. You're ruining it with the dialogue over it, because I think that the audience is seeing one thing, you want them to feel a certain way, but then there's this stuff going on in the background, which is pulling them out of it. So my other note on this section, again, I'm sorry because I keep repeating it, but Anderson Cooper and Lauren do not have ages. Chris told me that's a real guy. I didn't even know that. I live in the UK.
I mean,
I didn't know that.
I'm based in the US, so I'm well aware of who Anderson Cooper is, and I completely, I get that. Perhaps there's a story reason for having Anderson Cooper. If it's not, you could literally just use a CNN reporter. I mean, from a production perspective, it's going to be very difficult to get Anderson Cooper, depending on the scale of the feature. That said, I did have one line, which was, why is Anderson Cooper always listed as Anderson Cooper? I would just have Anderson in the character slug line. There's no need to list. You have Lauren and then Anderson Cooper. If you only have Lauren, you just need Anderson at this point.
Again, I would say though, on a positive, I thought your dialogue is really nice here. I felt it was very authentic and distinctive to the two characters as well. So
and it felt like a CNN interview. So I think from that particular perspective, you got that right. You got that element right. I think you just clean up some of these minor details, and I think you have a stronger flow into the next scene.
Okay, and how you finally was able to help in the arrest after he had abducted your daughter?
Oh, yes, but
one of the most interesting aspects of your book, Mrs. Thompson, is the fact that you were initially brought onto the case because you had what you described to be, and I quote, the ability to interact with objects and pull memories from them.
That's true.
Is that immediate or?
It's not like a light switch. No, I can turn it on and off with everything I encounter, but there are times when I come into contact with something and images appear.
Images?
It's like a video camera has captured a moment in time and I can view.
As if you were actually there?
Yes.
If that's true, and that is why you were brought onto the case, why would you stay with it? What did you see Richard Glenn do that would make you want to stay? Put you and your family in harm's way? My first note on that, the dialogue is really nice again, John. I think it's one of your strengths as a writer. I would say, reading this through, we didn't actually make a note of it, but I would say that reading it through and understanding the story as a whole, this could feel a little bit too exposition-y. You're telling us a lot of through the medium of a book, that how this world works and operates, and I think that if there were more ways to show it rather than tell it, I think that you definitely would be onto a winner there.
And I think the element of the obviously the error of and how you finally was able to is I'm not entirely sure.
And there's another one down with a comma after B.
So just rereading. Sorry, Mike mentioned. And similarly, if we're going full grammar, parentheses is 3 periods, not 2. So I assume there's a passage of time here. That is almost unnecessarily harsh, I guess. But at the same time, errors are errors and they're easy enough to fix. So I would just try and clean it up. And as I said, particularly the first 10 pages, if you do nothing for the rest of the screenplay, just focus on the first 10 pages, get them great, and then your audience will at least be with you from there on.
Otherwise, I would like to say as well, though, we won't read page 10 because we didn't actually have any notes on it, but I would say that as a screenplay, I actually did enjoy these 10 pages. I think that the genre, I can see why you got through to the semi-final. I think that obviously some readers have connected with the material. And I think that it was intriguing enough, I think, for Chris and I to think that there was something there. Not something we've necessarily seen a million times before, which is obviously something that always lands on our desk. But yeah, Chris, if you want to read the log line out, and then we just kind of.
So yeah, we'll do a log. So we'll do this for every screenplay. Often because Mike and I we won't read the log line before we read the first 10 pages, and we won't read the genre. Just so we can get a sense of whether or not the genre came across and whether or not the log line was clear from what we read. So log line, and it's a horror. A burned out psychic is convinced by a small town police force to come out of retirement and help them convict a serial killer who may have supernatural powers of his own.
Okay, so we did make some notes. I'm just going to read through some of the notes we had. We get a sense of this being a sci-fi horror, which is great because I think you've been able to convey the genre in the first 10 pages, and that's obviously one of those first boxes ticked. However, toward the end, that lengthy dialogue sequence with CNN felt like a bit of an exposition dump, as I mentioned. So again, is there a way to convey that information by showing us rather than telling us?
I mean, who is the protagonist? Is it Aldo? I mean, obviously we read the log line now and we have an idea. It's not clear from those initial 10 pages whether or not it was Aldo or Lauren. If it is the latter, which I believe it is from the log line, I'd have to ask why we haven't been introduced to her in the beginning instead of meeting her for the first time on page 8. Which I understand we'd like to have cold opens, but at the same time, we then need a little more. I think we need to see a little more from her.
I think we need to see her on page 1 or 2.
Or by the very least, we need something that's not a meeting on CNN. That feels like an exposition dump. To get, and also it's so important. Character introductions are so crucial. Mike and I will talk about it when we talk about the screenplay we're using as a prime example. Character introductions are so crucial, and unfortunately in this example, the first time we ever hear our lead character speak, we hear her off screen. We don't even see her face. We have no idea what she looks like, and that's the first way we're introduced to our character. From a story perspective, that's problematic. It's not clear that she's important in the first page, and so I think it's important to have a look. So you mentioned John. Could Aldo read?
Aldo be reading the book?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that if that is your main character, John, and I think if that's someone we're going to be following throughout the entirety of the screenplay, I think we have to see her before page 8. I really like the sequence with Aldo. I don't know how much of a part Aldo plays in the rest of the story. If Lauren is your main character, we have to see her, because one of the other notes I had was that you described her in your log line as a burned out psychic. I didn't get that through the interview.
No.
So I think that if there's some way to convey that information in the first 10 pages, as again, not to labor the point, but we will go over a screenplay that does really show a character introduction almost perfectly to a T. It's one of my favorite doing it. One of my favorite. But,
and I think, as I mentioned, it's extreme. We want our protagonists, or particularly the moment we meet them, we want it to be impactful. and therefore that we have to pay homage to that in the screenplay. And if we just have a voiceover and an expositional piece on a CNN interview is the first time we meet her, it doesn't constitute an impactful embrace of the lead character. Likewise, from a production perspective, actors are going to read the screenplay and they are going to have a problem with it because it's the first time they are introduced to the audience, and the first thing that we get to see as the audience of them is, the first thing we do is hear their voice, and secondly, a kind of a tedious CNN interview for all intents and purposes, and nothing from the at least from the first 3 pages of that excerpt of a CNN interview really goes on. It's not like. A crazy example, she punches Anderson Cooper in the face. We get a ton of information about her personality and her character from that one instance, but nothing like that happens. And that's impactful enough to say, this is the first time we're meeting our character and look at what she does. She's she draws the gun immediately. That's a great way to introduce a character. And we can do that in an exposition dump of an interview. What we can't do is have a moderately talking head that is the first time that we meet our character and learn nothing about her from her mannerisms other than what she's saying. And therefore, and that's why we always say show, don't tell, because unfortunately we want to see our character by action. We want to know her mannerisms. We want to know the type of person she is. All of those things are things we can learn from the way she interacts with other people, from the way she moves, from the clothes she's wearing. And none of that information is clear to us in the first CNN interview. So I think it's important to kind of.
I think the first 10 pages should also show what everyday life is like for your protagonist. So except that today is going to be different, and ultimately a conflict will arise that will set them on their own journey, on a new journey or whatever. So I think that if that is your protagonist, we need to be focusing a little bit more on it. Do you want to pull up the next script, Chris?
Yeah. So the next script is. I believe it was one of our top 10 actually. Let me share. Okay, so Dick. Written.
Need is with us though, so
no, unfortunately, but we are recording. Hopefully, we'll have. One thing I will say just quickly, John, more than happy to share with you. If you just shoot me an email, more than happy to send you. And for anybody else who's watching whose script was available and wanted us to go through them, we are more than happy to send the highlighted 10 pages through to you. But again, we're going to record this session as well and make it available for everybody to watch who can't. Hopefully it's the first time we're doing it actually. So fingers crossed.
I actually really like
like I said, we don't just obviously off the bat, we don't go into opening title pages often, particularly in a competition format. They are usually hidden from the reader. However, from a
production perspective, you would see this obviously, and I like the title, and I also like the image on the first page. It's made me interested to kind of read more, and I think that isn't to say that this works for every script. So in that respect, I think you have to kind of understand the tone and genre of the material before doing this. But knowing the genre of this piece, I think otherwise it was a really good start, and it hooked me as a reader.
Definitely.
Page 1.
Sorry. Sorry. Yep. Okay. Over black, we hear a man whistling through the tune of Girls by Beastie Boys. Fade in. Interior, Rich's apartment, bathroom, morning. A steamy shower. The whistling continues. Shampoo squirts out of the bottle onto a burly hand. Richard Rich Johnson, an irresistibly attractive asshole, 30s, lathers the shampoo into his thick hair. The thing to know about this playboy, women want him, men want to be him, and the only thing bigger than Richard's ego is his dick. We drift down his tall, toned, tattooed body, his bicep with a tattoo of a heart on fire. Instead of the traditional mum homage, it reads me. His chest with a no hard feelings tattoo, his hip tattooed with X's names stacked on each other. past his defined pelvic lines, wrapping around to his perfectly shaped butt, with birthmark on each cheek, oddly resembling nipples. He pumps his rear. Shower off. Seconds later, big wet feet land on a shower mat, punting a Magnum condom wrapper out of the way. Steam is wiped off the bathroom mirror. Hyped off his own reflection, Rich whips his hips as we hear hefty slapping sounds coming from down below. Intro credits begin as we kick in Girls by Beastie Boys and thrust into a montage of Rich and his hot hookups all around Los Angeles. Lyric up, girls, all I really want is girls. In a grocery store break room, a sweaty and wild-eyed Rich sprays whipped cream into his mouth, pull back to reveal he's feverishly fucking the hot store manager. Give it to me, Rich, give it to me. Rich unloads the whipped cream in her mouth. She loves it.
Okay, so first note on this one, irresistibly attractive asshole, I think is a fantastic character description. It's extremely visual, and you're allowing me to kind of build a picture of this guy in my head with just a few words. So I think that was really well done. Your job as a writer is to make the reader visualize the scene the way you see it. And this writer is doing a great job at doing that with economy as well.
Yeah. The traditional mom homage, and it reads me on his tattoo, instantly gives us a great idea of his personality. It's a almost perfect example of show, don't tell. And so I think that particular elements like that really, this feeding back to John, the work on Lauren, as we meet Lauren. These are instances where we are literally less than half a page in. This is our protagonist. I'm not saying that we need to see our protagonist in the first half a page, but in this particular instance, when we do meet our protagonist, we're getting clear indication of their personality or the type of person they are, and I think that leans strong into something we all endeavor to achieve, because we want to get a strong sense of who this character is from the get-go. The line here, he pumps his rear, immediately kind of made me laugh, and it gives us a sense that perhaps this in itself, like I said, we're a half page in, and I feel this is a comedy, just from that one line.
Yeah, I think the opening page,
strong example.
The opening page is very detailed and concise on its character introduction and the action lines. I think it's really nice work.
Yeah, I mean, the action lines are broken and well paced. We literally go from boom, boom, boom. We have those moments that kind of flow well, and they make it less of a harsh read. We don't look at this page and see, I mean, there's nothing worse than seeing, as a reader, giant blocks of writing that just feel daunting to approach. In this particular instance, yeah.
My one note here, sorry to interrupt you, but my note here was in a grocery store break room. So I think that needs its own line. I'm all for not having the slug, like Chris mentioned before, but you have to distinguish a change of location a little cleaner than that.
Particularly the way we've given it. Yeah, I mean, in this instance, we've been on Rich so long and we've seen so much in terms of a montage that I think this is the first instance. I know, well, having read the script, I know we're going to move into a montage of other elements. I think the first element of the montage, we need to be a little more specific of kind of where it is that we're headed.
Yeah. All right, page 2. At the Randy's Donut lot. So it's the same thing there again. A parked police cruiser rocks. Inside, Rich is handcuffed above his head as a hot cop wildly rides him while pointing a taser to his forehead. Stop resisting, stop resisting. Lyric up, girls. All I really want is girls. In a classroom, a hot teacher in pigtails, thick framed glasses, and bright red lipstick unzips his pants. Her eyes glow at the sight of his. A+, D. She licks her lips and opens wide. In a hospital room, Rich snaps on surgical gloves, wearing scrubs. We move past him to find a hot nurse lying on the bed, spread eagle. As he approaches her, we pan to the heart rate monitor's line, jumping and rapidly beeping. Lyric up. I hope she'll say you and me should hit the hay. In a candlelit sex dungeon, Rich is seated tight in a full-body latex suit, breathing through a plastic tube. Richard, Richard, Richard. Enter hot dominatrix, sporting a tantalizing leather outfit. She climbs on top of him and rips one of his breathing tubes. Rich squirms as we hear his muffled screams. You'd think he's in agony, but the erection lifting up against the latex says otherwise. On a casting couch, seen through a phone camera, porn star Riley Reid sets up the shot and speaks. Hey guys, welcome back to Riley Fucks Fans. This week, lucky guy is Riley moves off to reveal Rich, grinning in a Pornhub shirt. Rich Johnson. Okay. Nice montage of sex there. Again, I think in first 2 pages, we're really given a sense of this character in his daily life. So it's nice work there.
Yeah, and likewise, as much sex as there is, it obviously sets up for the importance that theme plays in the rest of the screenplay. And we've done all of that in 2 pages. So it feels somewhat heavy-handed often to some people. I would assume some readers may find it a lot to take in, but I think, and obviously this is a more of a description of understanding the story in general and having read the 10 pages and the logline. This is a great example of where the story is headed in thematic approach, just in 2 pages alone. The character descriptions, again, they're limited, particularly for characters we're not going to see again. Which I think but it still gives us a strong sense of what they might look like. A hot teacher in pigtails, a hot nurse lying on the bed. We know that these are characters. It's clearly defined that these are new characters we meet, but it's also by the fact, unlike obviously in John's work earlier, where we missed, unfortunately not included the either just actual character descriptions or ages. With this, we assume we're not going to see these characters again, therefore it's irrelevant. And I think that it's clear from the fact that these are montages that this is slightly different, and I think it's quite strong in that respect. So a neon lit bedroom covered in plush anime dolls. Rich is wearing a dog furry costume, pounding a cat furry from behind. Meow, meow, meow. Lyric up, girls. The track crescendos as we cycle through the women climaxing. Rich finishes off on the hot teacher against the chalkboard. Yes, yes, yes. Hot nurse's legs dangle over his shoulders, shaking. Pan to the heart rate monitor flatlining. Lyric up, girls. Hot cop slips her trigger finger on the taser, sending 50,000 volts to Rich's forehead. As he convulses, she cuts. Lyric up, girls. Rich rails the cat fury harder and harder until meow. They topple over each other. Rich removes his furry head, exhausted. Lyric up, girls. On the nightstand, Rich's phone buzzes. He checks to see it's hundreds of text notifications from Crazy Amy. Answer your phone. We need to talk, babe. Cat fury clawing at him. Meow. She's ready for round 2. Rich tosses his phone, puts his furry head back on, and looks to the camera with a ridiculous, sinister, furry smile. Title up, Dick. So the line about Crazy Amy here really gives us a strong sense of intrigue. So I assume this is the first name we see. It's the first name we see that's going to leave us with questions. We don't need to know any more information than that. I assume, particularly given its text messages, we would literally see Crazy Amy. So as I said, it's a good level of intrigue. I hope from this point on we meet the character, and when we do meet them, they have a better description. But at this point, it's an intriguing element, and it's a great opener right up into the titles and credits, as mentioned earlier, running up to the title, Dick. So again, 3 pages. We get a sense that it's somewhat humorous. I assume we definitely get some element of what the theme may be, or at least leading towards it, and we get a sense of who this main character is, Rich.
Okay, 4. Downtown LA street, a vintage sports car pulls up and parks in front of a trendy coffee shop. Rich hops out, brushing leftover furry feathers off his pants. As he approaches the coffee shop, Rich checks his phone to see an incoming call from Crazy Amy. He answers reluctantly. Crazy Amy, how are you?
Oh, I just love your little nicknames.
Rich enters coffee shop and instantly makes eyes with Stacy, 20s, the beautiful barista with an immaculate breast behind the counter.
Look, I apologize for blowing up your phone, baby, but I know, but you know I'm new to LA, a country girl with big dreams. I was a lost baby deer until I found you. Nice stud.
Large black coffee. Stacy smiles seductively and heads off to the coffee machine. Rich, of course, eyes her backside.
But the baby deer is growing up, and I need to recommit to Jesus and explore this concrete jungle all on my own.
Rich looks flabbergasted. Wasn't this a one-night stand? Whatever, he decides to play along. Baby, you're breaking up with me. You were my forever person. Okay, so the line, Rich, of course, eyes her backside, I think is a really nice way of describing the character again. I think it's this writer has a nice way of kind of talking to his reader and making the read enjoyable in that sense.
Yeah, I like similarly, I like the line, you're my forever person. Again, it veers more toward the comic element of the genre, which by this point we were assuming is a comedy. But it again just reinforces the character and the way he speaks. Every time we speak so far, at least we understand we understand context clues from the type of person he is. We're getting more and more of a sense of who he is. And
I would say on that page though, wasn't this a one-night stand? As an action line, there's no way for the viewer to know that. So that's a tough one for me, because I think that it's very difficult for an actor to show that wasn't this a one-night stand. I think you've got to maybe possibly lose it or find a cleaner way to do that.
Yeah. Listen, our night out was the most amazing experience of my life, but the Lord is the only man I want inside me.
Oh my fucking God.
Stacy arrives with his coffee. Rich points to a croissant.
Well, I guess this is Toodles for now.
Rich watches Stacy lean over to pick up a napkin, gnawing on his fist. Toodles, who says that? You're so perf. Rich hangs up as Stacy hands him a croissant.
Baby sis, helping her through a spiritual rough patch.
Baby sis, huh? Rich nods, taking a big bite of the croissant.
Has a thing for the Heavenly Father.
Well, we all need a daddy. Rich chokes. Did you just hear that right?
I can be your daddy.
Rich quickly jots his number on a receipt and slides it to her. Off Stacy's flirtatious gaze, we cut to. Yeah, so page 5. I can be your daddy read a little awkward and off character for me. That particular line threw me a little bit. It doesn't necessarily seem in keeping. It seems a little more awkward for the character of Rich, who is this uber confident sex pest by the look of it. So I think reconsider that line, or perhaps just reword it. I would at least consider. Just as I say, as a reader, our notes are merely responsive.
Yeah, that the writer might be trying to kind of show some vulnerability to Rich here. But that wasn't shown through. I think where Chris is coming from is it wasn't shown throughout that entire passage of the scene, any vulnerability whatsoever. So to have one line just does feel a little bit out of character.
Yeah. And actually, if we're going grammar errors, as we mentioned earlier, the parentheses after I, there's no space, but then there's a space after every other parentheses in that sentence. So if we're going full grammar, like just clean it up a little bit.
Okay. High five creative lobby. LED sign of hands high-fiving hangs on the lobby wall. On contact, the agency name appears below high five creative. Rich enters, greeted by the receptionist Helen, 20, sitting at her desk. Hey, Rich.
Rebecca.
Rich continues on his way.
It's Helen.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. My bad. No, that's you.
High five creative general area. We follow Rich through the modern hip space, bustling with 20 and 30 somethings. An account executive crosses frame on a skateboard. A new hire shadows a senior manager on the move. On the agency's indoor basketball court, some staff play a pickup game. We follow their basketball rolling to Rich's feet. Hey, Rich, a little help?
Sure thing, bud.
Rich picks up the ball and punts it far, far away. Oh, what the fuck? Rich grins and walks away. Asshole. A high five creative hallway. Rich makes his way down the hall, texting his best friend Adam, whose profile icon is the poop emoji. So my one note on that page was texting his best friend Adam. Again, there's no way to know that information other than reading it. So I think that you can just have texting Adam, and it's something that we can later on maybe learn that it's his best friend. I think in terms of the ease of the read, I think it's just a bit of information that
it's a piece of information we won't see, therefore it's irrelevant, and I would lose it from that perspective. Just to clean up, as you say, just in terms of cleaning up the initial 10 pages.
Any notes on the other pages though?
No. Yeah. Across the board. Yeah.
All right. So do you want to take it?
After a strange night out with a mystical seductress, a cocky womanizer wakes up to discover his manhood is missing and embarks on a desperate search to get it back, only to find love along the way. And it is a comedy.
I love that, by the way. I think it has the potential to be a interesting, funny comedy that we haven't seen before. Yeah, I like it. I think that, like I said, the title of the film kind of leans into this as well. Yeah, it's working on a number of levels. Your protagonist is...
Well, he's rich and interesting, I think, as a character, yeah.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, sorry, yeah, I think... he's a rich and interesting character, excuse the pun. But we've seen just enough of him in brief instances to give us an insight and spark intrigue, and also leave a little room for growth. I do wonder if we could possibly explore his personality a little more, beyond just the superficial having sex with everything he sees, so we can maybe understand a little bit more of his wants and needs as well.
I mean, you definitely established the tone, which we mentioned, and particularly the genre across the piece. The dialogue exchanges are funny, the action lines are concise and they're well crafted. I think particularly with this example, the theme is the heart of any story, and everything that happens within the screenplay is regulated by the chosen theme. Usually those themes are boiled down to a sentence or even a word. The line, I think it's page, I don't know if we saw it, I think, because we didn't highlight it, but
It came on page 10.
On page 10, we have a line from a creative executive who states to Rich, "Karma's going to be a bitch." It's delivered a little late, but we feel that's the message that you're going for. Maybe you can tease that a little bit beforehand. Traditionally, theme is something. I mean, if we're going by the traditional storytelling model and the books, you should be hitting that mark around page 5. So page 10 feels a little late. I think there are definitely moments to have it prior to that. You have a strong build up in the first 3 pages in terms of in terms of the introduction to the character.
Again, I think that comes down to my previous point, Chris. I think that if we understand the character in those opening pages a little bit more beyond just having sex with every woman, and maybe the dialogue exchange that can allow us a little bit more insight into his character, I think we can maybe deliver the theme of that as well. Because obviously it doesn't have to necessarily be spoken by the character, but spoken in his presence and something he later understands. My real takeaway for this script, which, by the way, Amid, I think it was Amid that wrote it, right, Chris? It was ostensibly a very well-crafted 10 pages. But my main note would be, do not waste time. I think it's important to maximize script economy and get to the story you intend to tell really quick. it might be worthwhile thinking about setting up the dramatic situation, especially pertaining to your logline, a little sooner. If you have me hooked in the first 10 pages, I want to read the rest. At the minute, I think that those first 10 pages, while doing a very good job of setting Rich up as this character that is a player, so to speak, we're not learning much more beyond that. At the minute, us coming across as a dick. Literally.
I mean,
that is obviously what he is.
Yeah, and it's very possible in this instance that perhaps, I mean, having reread the logline and reread the pages again, it's very possible that this crazy Amy may be that mystical seductress that you make a reference to, which is great that you bring her forward early into the script. I think I want to see a little bit more, know a little bit more about her. I'm not saying that is the case. I haven't read the entire.
So that's the thing. Again, you've done a good job as a writer. You have set up intrigue. I'm starting to question characters. Chris is questioning characters. I think that is something you want in your first 10 pages. So I think for that, really, really nice work.
Yeah, congrats.
You want to pull us up on the third script, Chris?
Yep. So I think we have another Amy. Is it Amy? Amy Mestri. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Witches. Amy and Katie. Oh, and sorry, and Katie, I believe, is here. Let me just pull it up. Sorry, I'm just trying to find how to do it. Oh yeah, always get lost with this bit. Okay. Okay, we can see that. Yeah. Yep. Fantastic. Okay, so hello guys, I know, or girls, I know both of you are here, which is fantastic. So it's better to have people live. Again, so as we said to John, more than happy to share this highlighted version with you guys. And likewise, if there's any major questions you had about that, feel free to email Mike or I afterwards, or whatever you have any questions. Within reason, I'm more than happy to offer out time where I can. But if there are questions you have or whatever that Mike and I can answer and help with, we'd be happy to do so. Okay, so
just before we start, I actually did have one note, Chris, which we're going to just dive straight in with.
Yeah.
My first question, we don't obviously, I don't think we don't get these on competition reads or anything like that. But what's with the watermark? These are usually done with production scripts to see who might have leaked it. But this is your own names. So it's a bit odd. And don't worry too much about sharing material. I know that's a problem for a lot of writers, not wanting to share material, think that it's going to get out there and somebody's going to steal it. Yeah. If you have concerns with stuff like that, there are ways to register your scripts with script registering services. I know the WGA is one, but I would just consider that. I would share scripts and not worry about watermarking them, especially like I said, because then it comes. But if this was leaked online, you're going to go to court and sue each other. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just distracting. I think it's probably the first or second screenplay I've ever seen in a competition that had it, that I've read. So it really isn't the norm. And again, the reason it's not the norm is because it's distracting. So I would just get rid of it. We'll take the first page. But move on. Yeah. So cold opening image. This is a TV show. Obviously, we've got cold open to begin with. Witch's Cottage, Los Angeles morning. A palm tree lined street, a thatched roof storybook cottage, lush garden, pitchfork art, a pack of wolves sleep beside a whimsical RV in the front yard. A sign reads, "Witch, please." Living room continuous. The unsettling sound of old-timey music plays on Victrola. A dusty grimoire, an old apothecary cabinet. Black cats scurry past witches' brooms. Mazzelina, where's the toaster? I can't find my toaster.
and I need to make toast. Mazzelina, 2,200-year-old witch, looks 35, a menacing presence. Sits in the dark, a very naked body illuminated by floating candles. Sparks shoot from her hands.
Hibbity jibbity, 'tis the hour. Bow down before my limitless power.
Sister.
I do not care.
Etherelda, 1,900-year-old witch, looks 35, a Stepford wife with kind eyes, masking a broken heart, enters holding bread.
She meant.
Oh, the toaster was present from my dearly departed Barry. It holds great sentimental value.
Sentiments are for weak mortals. Your toaster was useless, so I gave it a higher purpose. Okay, so my first note on this page was the 2,200-year-old and 1,900-year-old. If you're looking to go for something similar to what we do in the shadows, it might be worthwhile having this as a super, because again, we do not know there's no way for us to know this information unless we read the script. So if it's important, you have to show us. So maybe have, on supers. The other thing I was going to note though is that we highlighted the dialogue. I thought your dialogue was excellent. I think it's characters really distinct. I think it helps having two writers on this as well. Pacing is good, and it's really funny actually. So nice one.
Yeah. I mean, you'll notice we actually referenced what we do in the shadows a fair amount here. It feels very reminiscent of that, having read particularly the first 10 pages, but also just from the first page. I think we began that comparison on page 1, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It might be annoying for you both because we're fans of that, so we can be swayed by it. But because
both the film and the series, so yeah.
Because we know the material so well, and we do like Taika Waititi. When we see similarities in work, as any reader, you'll find a similarity to something, and you can't separate the two sometimes. But we'll come to those points later on.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to take Etherelda, Chris?
Yeah. Tell me where it is.
No.
Tell me.
No.
Tell me.
You want toast? Here's your toast. Phoecia. Mazzelina magics the bread on fire and the nearby curtains. Hope those curtains weren't from Barry. Witch's cottage. The cottage is on fire. Firefighters rush past Mazzelina and Etherelda. One stops and tips his helmet. Mazzelina, Etherelda.
I made you snickerdoodles this time.
Etherelda offers a box labeled Firefighter Apology Cookies. Brahilda, 700-year-old witch, looks 35, whimsical, wears a Bohemian silk, steps out of her RV in wonderment. My, what a beautiful fire show. Neighbors walk by and shrug. This happens often.
Fucking witches. End of cold open.
I really like that cold open. As a TV show, I think that it sets up the characters. We got to meet the main characters. We get a sense of their world, their personality, and insight into them, really quickly in 2 pages. So I think that was really good work.
There is a strong sense of the relationship between the siblings in the first 2 pages here. Especially, I think, I highlighted the lines. No, tell me, no. The kind of back and forth, they feel like siblings.
As Chris and I brought that to life.
Yeah. That gives us a strong indication of future potential conflict, which is great. So within 2 pages, we've set up the conflict dynamic between these 2 sisters, which I think is a great is a positive note.
I think a cold open should work to intrigue the audience, because this is normally, especially with TV shows, this will run before a trailer or something like that, or before adverts, and then we'll go straight into it. And I think it works really well for that. Really. Okay, Act 1.
Interior witch's cottage, sitting room. Wood panel walls, cast iron chandelier, dried herbs hang from wooden beams. Interview. Hi, I'm Mazzelina.
I'm Etherelda, and we are sisters and best friends.
We also happen to be witches, the oldest, the strongest, and the most renowned. I am, of course, only referring to myself.
And I give great hugs.
Etherelda hugs Mazzelina. Mazzelina stiffens. Witches Heritage Museum. Sisters stand in front of a giant painting and the half goat half man Pan. Welcome to our museum, the Witches Heritage Museum. Sisters awkwardly point around the room and smile. Witches are immortal beings born from an ancient bloodline, gifted magical powers by the Greek god Pan.
I was born in the year 197 BC.
Mazalina points to a large family tree. Her name is second from the top.
Okay, so we highlighted Witches Heritage Museum here because I'm all for economy, but I think this is such an interesting location, especially having read your logline as well, that I feel we could explore it a little more. I think we could, just as an idea, could we see images of witches throughout history? Could we see woodcuts, tapestries, oil paintings, just some sort of description of this environment? I think, be descriptive with it and really paint a picture of what this museum looks like to the reader. And obviously, what is ostensibly going to be a TV show, hopefully for you guys, what this will look like on the screen as well. Imagine the reader will never see your show. You still want them to get a sense of what they're going to see or what you want them to see. Okay, page 4. You want to take her, Chris?
Yeah, I was born in 75 AD, but you wouldn't know it.
We stay youthful by sucking out baby souls.
She's kidding.
No, I'm not.
We do not eat babies. We aren't the witches from Hocus Pocus. No one compares to Bette Midler.
I do love beaches. The sisters show off a display of ancient stones.
We have a rite of passage called the locked-in ceremony. It binds you to whatever mortal age you are at that time. We both locked in at 35.
Behold these photos from locked-in ceremonies. Close on, 2 ancient stones with caveman-like stick figures dancing and drinking around a fire.
This one is mine. You can tell because the technology had advanced, so the quality is much better.
They look exactly the same. That's me and Tum Tum. Man, we drank a lot of goat's blood that night. Jupiter, 22, angsty feminist, wears a t-shirt and with fallopian tubes giving the finger, enters in a huff. Mazalina, can't keep hexing Gen Z influencers with warts.
So in this example, in this page, sorry, it says that again, just a strong showing of differences in characters. Love the fact that they're not on the same page. I think that's a great example of strong dialogue. Often one character, the idea is to have one character on one page and the other character on another. I do love beaches, whilst one's simply just talking about Hocus Pocus and Bette Midler. Similarly, the aspect of the locked-in ceremony leans itself well to adding a new character, ideally, or further characters down the line that simply lock themselves in too late, or the careful notion that they align. In that particular instance, actually, I would say, be cautious not to align yourself using that example to align yourself too closely with what we do in the shadows. They had something similar, I think, with. Is it Peter? I think his name is the old vampire, which are great examples. But again, the comedy elements are certainly there, and it's strong. That wasn't me. Jupiter shows a video on her phone. My name is Mazalina Frangopoulos. Today on my TikTok, I am hexing all Gen Z influencers with warts.
That wasn't even TikTok. You were on Instagram Live.
Which one is Instacart? That's the one for your grocery dating.
Do they have Instacart for Windows? Interview. Running social media for a couple of 200,000-year-old witches is not the easiest job. When they hired me to draw more attention to the museum, I was like, dope, I'm a crystal witch. I snap. I guess I should have known what I was signing up for.
Jupiter holds up a Craigslist ad. Seeking social media whiz for a witch museum. Very cool. Meet at hip coffee shop on DTLA tomorrow. Also, we are witches. Interior museum lobby morning. Charity is the manager here. She's kind of a lot. Everyone I work with is a lot. Charity, 40, yellow blazer with a t-shirt that reads, "I am jacked on history, stalks after the only museum visitor."
Okay, so visitor is a small thing, but it's the first time we're meeting them. In keeping with the rest of your work, it should be capitalized. And also, if we're going to be following this person, maybe give them some sort of description, even if it's a man. I don't know right now if that's a man, a woman, if they're young, they're old. If they're not important later on in the story, you can keep it really brief, but I think you've got to give us a little bit more than just visitor, or capitalize it at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so page 6. Over 9 million innocent women were murdered during the burning times because they knew about herbs or didn't want to marry their cousin. No real witches were killed because witches are immortal. Isn't that fascinating? Charity laughs loudly. The visitor exits quickly. Oh, okay. Come back soon. The sisters sit on a bench in the museum doing a crossword.
What is the beverage mentioned in Khalees's hit 2003 song?
Milkshake.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like,
"My milkshake is better than yours." Lights flicker. The front door magically flies open. Outside, a boy on a bike stops suddenly, drops his bike in the middle of the road and walks to the museum in a trance. "Milkshake, give me milkshake." A car swerves around the bike, slamming into a telephone pole, which falls onto a line of parked cars. Hundreds of boys ascend on the museum begging for milkshakes. I love when your magic singing brings all the boys. Close on, young boys.
"This is not a good look for us."
Okay.
So the aspect of spells to attract young men, which, whilst comical, it seems a little broken in the storyline. I assume they want to attract people to their museum, and if they're capable of doing so, why not do it in that way? It feels like the story world and the rules here need a little more fleshing out. Likewise, I made a note previously on the element of witches being immortal, and they're described as immortal, but they don't lock in their age until they're 35, which is assuming they aren't immortal to that point. So it's confusing. The story world is a little confusing. I think it's something you want to fully flesh out, particularly with television. I assume if you guys are serious about this, I assume you've started work, if not already have a Bible. That's an element of this kind of magical realism and world that you would be wanting to flesh out and kind of set the rules, particularly with pilots. These are the rules you're setting up that you can't break for the rest of the series or for the rest of the show. So just be cautious when you make statements or use particular tropes that they are in keeping with the story world.
Yeah. Also, we highlighted the dialogue there because pop references age scripts really, really fast. Most people of a certain age won't even get that reference, and you have to ask how much you really need it. Lucky for you, Chris and I are older, so we do get it, but it might land in the hands of someone who doesn't. So you've got to maybe think, is there a more uniquely comical way to deliver that same sort of thing? Maybe she has her own song and she's a terrible singer.
I think on that front, sorry to interrupt, Mike. I think on that front, I don't think it's necessary for it to be the milkshake. Just from our perspective, the element of Pied Piper that you're trying to play with here, and the fact that they are witches, it's strong, and there are comical elements to it. I think it's unnecessary to date the piece with something like this. If you're trying to get this show made and it takes 10 years, you're further dating the piece. You may find 20-something development execs reading it and it's completely missed the mark. So I would make sure these jokes land the way they should, regardless of the reader. And I think there's a cleaner way to transition that. Like Mike said, we don't need to date it with a particular pop reference, pop culture reference.
And I think at the end of the page, Chris, I think we did highlight, I'm not sure if we did.
No, we
didn't. Okay, so my other note here was that the visitor was still there, or I was wondering if the visitor was still there when the boys came in and how would they react to a whole load of boys coming into the museum? Because
Yeah.
obviously a lot of comedy is driven by reaction of characters. So I just think there's maybe missing a moment there, especially as this is, you know, the one human we saw before we saw the witches. I think it's just something to
Yeah.
take.
I don't think we made another point until here. So what we'll do.
Want to read through page 9 then?
Well, let's just read through 7, 8, and 9, and then
Okay.
we'll finish up on that. Yeah. Exterior witch's cottage, front yard. Etheldra tends to some rose bushes. The weather in LA is a botanist's dream. Mazzelina tans on a lawn chair with a martini.
Oh, sorry. It's like the Mediterranean without all the witch burnings.
I met my human husband, Barry, here. We lived in this home for 70 years until his tragic demise. Reveal. Feldra's garden is an immaculate shrine for Barry. He was so young. Close on, large photo magically hovering over the oldest man you've ever seen. Mazzelina's room. Dark toned room, stacks of books and mugs on the floor, pin-up posters of men and women, massive swords hanging from above a Gothic fireplace. Interview.
I was born in a dungeon of a castle. My name was forged by the cacophony of painful sounds my mother made during my difficult labor. My name means difficult.
Images, black and white, of Mazzalina in the 1920s speakeasy brawl. Grainy photo from the 1800s of Mazzalina in a duel. An ancient mosaic of Mazzalina in the center of Dionysius style orgy.
For the last 7 decades, I lived the nomadic dream. Fucking, yeah. Fighting? Only if we were fucking. There's no domesticating this wild cat. I'm just here to take care of my sad, tragic sister.
Hi there. Etheldra in the doorway, holding a laundry basket. Have any laundry?
Nope.
Not even down in your cave?
Nope.
Well, okie dokie then, I guess. Etheldra leaves. Mazzalina eyes camera. That was a close one. Etheldra's room. Floral bedding, porcelain dolls, lace curtains. Etheldra rummages through her closet, barely hidden inside a life-size man made of paper mache. She pulls out a photo. I love this photo. This is the night Barry and I met. Look at his tie. Black and white image. Etheldra stands with Barry, who wears a tie covered in tigers. Great tie. My name means fertile fruit. Funny thing is, I'm unable to bear children. Etheldra laughs mechanically, stares sadly into the distance. Etheldra flips pancakes. Mazzalina, oh, really, Mike, sorry. Mazzalina sits in the kitchen table. You can't sit there, that's Barry's seat.
Barry's been dead for 4 years. I am sitting here because it is a seat in my house.
There's no time limit on grief.
There should be. We're all real tired of listening to you blabber on about Barry.
How dare you? I don't even talk about him that much. Kitchen continuous. Jupiter sips away from her takeaway cup. Oh, they gave me a cappuccino instead of a chai latte.
At least your husband isn't dead.
Museum. A visitor eyes a suit of armor. Is this really a piece of Joan of Arc's armor?
My husband is dead. Okay, so my note there was the visitor eyes the suit of armor. It felt like, again, it was a moment that deserved a bit more than just one line. We're back in the museum with our first human visitor. I just think that just give it a little bit more of description there. I think it'd be nice. I would say those 7 to 9, there was no notes really from Chris and I.
I did pick up one, which I meant to say, Etheldra's room, floral bedding, porcelain dolls, lace curtains. Etheldra rummages through her closet, and then the paper mache man inside. Nice description in terms of setting the scene for her bedroom. Often, particularly the show don't tell aspect, there's a great takeaway once we can rummage through characters' closets to see the intimate details that they keep and the things that they keep that they maintain. So 100% would say that was a great kind of inclusion, as it were.
Yeah. What's the log line for that one, Chris?
So the logline for that is obviously it's a comedy, a TV. Two immortal witch sisters navigate life together in LA, where they struggle to run a witch museum that a group of witch-hating zealots called the NHAA, Normal Human American Alliance, threaten to destroy. Witches is a half-hour fantasy mockumentary about the surprisingly human relationship between supernatural siblings Vaselina and Etheldra. Yeah.
As a log line, I would lose the next bit, which is a half-hour fantasy mockumentary. That's not a log line, so
it should come across in the piece, the fact that it's a mockumentary. So it's definitely not necessary.
Okay, so we had a couple notes on this. Again, super complimentary of your guys' dialogue. I think it's extremely strong. I think it was really funny and immediately, for me, conveyed the tone and genre. In that sense as well, I think your cold open did a great job of allowing actions to define the character. My note on that would be that after that, we got a much of the character through interview and their dialogue through interview. So I was wondering if there was more ways to show this, because I enjoyed the cold open so much for how you displayed how characters are working because of the things they're doing, as opposed to just telling us. My, again, on that point would be, why have you chosen the interview and documentary style? Using, as we have done multiple times in this, what we do in the shadows as an example, they gave titles before the film to establish what was happening. I think I literally had it written here. It says, every few years, a secret society in New Zealand gathers for a special event, the Unholy Masquerade. In the months leading up to the ball, a documentary crew was granted full access. So this sets it up. This sets everything up. And without this, we don't know why we're interviewing them. So I think that we need, if you want to stick to the interview thing and the documentary style, I think maybe we have to put that in there in some way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a strong concept from the offset. Has a great deal of pieces to take it. It feels, as we said, extremely reminiscent of what we do in the shadows, but it does feel as though it lacks the self-awareness of a mockumentary, and particularly given that you've labeled it a mockumentary in the logline. In The Office, for example, either David Brent or Michael Scott's characters, they tend to look off camera or look to camera. That gives us insights into their playful side and emotional vulnerability.
On that point, there was one moment where you did have that, which I thought worked really well, was with the laundry basket, and she had a look after she went. Again, like Chris is saying, I think if you want to establish this mockumentary style, you've got to have more moments like that.
Yeah, I mean, if we use the example of, again, what we do in the shadows, and apologies for us over abusing that example, but it is very similar. The character interactions with the camera also highlight their differences. One has a playful nature, is overtly comfortable in front of camera, and another is bashful, shy, and a complete introvert and shies away from the camera. So I think perhaps making a clearer definition of what how these characters interact with the camera, with the particular camera. I would also say, great cold open, but it's not clear it's a mockumentary in the cold open. The cold open should get at that straight away. There should be, I forget the names, but Mazzolina, for example, looks to camera, looks away. An element of that.
Past a documentary crew.
Yeah. Something that just explains to us straight away from the cold open. If we're trying to sell this to a studio, they need to be able to know that almost page 1 or 2, we get a sense. We get that in the Office from the very beginning. Within a minute, we get the sense, we know what this is, and it's not entirely clear from this particular example, particularly in the cold open. So it's something I would try and instill a little bit more. The most important element of any TV episode or series or serial is the fact that it should feel like an episode of every other. It should feel like any episode just plucked from it doesn't need to feel like it's a setup. So I would say we want to, everything we need to know, we want to know very quickly, and we want it to feel like it's just like we could be watching episode 5. It felt to me, because that wasn't clear, we want to know from the beginning that this is what we're watching. We're watching a mockumentary. It's in the style of The Office, or so forth.
Yeah, I think one of the big, probably the biggest note overall for me, especially considering this is a half hour, just read 10 pages, is that we still haven't seen any conflict outside of that cold open. And reading your log line, I wonder if the NHAA could come in a little bit sooner. Yes, it is essential to build the world and give us a deep sense of these characters, but I think you could be doing it in a more concise way so that we can get things moving a little sooner.
Yeah, I would say in that example, sorry, Mike, there are a plethora. As writers, I'm sure you guys have plenty of examples you could use. There are a plethora of examples that come to mind just now thinking about it. For example, posters placard over the wall of the NHAA, you know, bring some element and them tearing it down and cursing the NHAA. Doors bolted together and wrapped, and they make a reference, this is the fucking NHAA. We want to know as an audience that there's an element of it, that they're always present, and given it's so crucial to your logline, I would look to particularly within the first 10 pages, I would look to have some element, as small as it is. Give us clues, give us some.
Yeah, I mean, it can even be when
leans to it.
That first human visitor, they could be asking, "You're not the NHAA, right?" Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and instantly, as an audience member, we are,
and just to allow us to know that there is a conflict there.
As an audience member, we're interested. We want to know in that instance, who, what's this? There's a problem. You know, we want to know that about those particular issues, and it adds intrigue and it keeps us watching.
Really nice script. Thought it was funny. Definitely something I would watch. So really nice work.
I will say one other. So we made clear references to what we do in the shadows. I don't know how familiar you guys are with that. I assume you're very familiar because I assume you've done some research particularly. I don't know where you guys are based or if you've started a Bible or something. There is an alternative, and the glaring similarities aside, if that's a route you're happy to go down, I did mention, I think I mentioned this to Mike when we were doing a read through. This is also primed for a potential spin-off of something like What We Do in the Shadows, that you could pitch it that way. You know, if we have a world that we already know exists of What We Do in the Shadows and vampires, this notion that witches also exist, and perhaps there's a possibility to crossover. I definitely think that's something you guys might want to consider. It will alleviate concerns over the similarities because you're in the same world.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, if you wanted to go down that route, you know, you can have the fact that the documentary crew could be the same people that did What We Do in the Shadows, and they've come on to here, and these witches want fame in the same way those vampires kind of got fame. So it's just something.
Yeah, but just something to consider. Yeah.
Otherwise, I think you've got to think of ways to differentiate your material from that, because obviously the TV show has just come out or been out for a while from that, and you don't want a reader to just immediately think, I'm seeing the same thing but with witches instead of vampires. So
yeah, that's
just a note to think about.
Yeah. So the final one we have from this is a script which is a short. So we've only done a couple of pages. Just off the bat, we decided to only do the 2 pages because the first 2 pages, I think it's a 20-page screenplay, and the first 2 pages equate to practically the 10th of and should hold the same impact as the first 10 pages of a feature.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that if you haven't written shorts, they pretty much do the exact same thing as a feature, but condensed down. So if you're doing a 100-page screenplay and you're doing a 10-page short, that first page on the short has to have the same impact as your first 10 pages. So that's kind of why we're going to go through these first 2 pages and show you what we're thinking. When writing a short, economy is key. You get in, you get out, and always keep moving.
I mean, again, we're not going to go over opening pages, but as you'll notice, printed with the demonstration of version of fade in, please lose that. There's plenty of screenwriting software and applications to use. It looks a little off and amateurish. It immediately formulates an opinion of your writing by the reader. So I think it's completely unnecessary. I mean, we're fans. We're sponsored by Write a Duet. I think they allow you the first script or two for free. Use something like that. It doesn't come up with, you know, these elements, but it is entirely distracting. Similarly with the girls' script, on which it's just distracting and unnecessary. It's something we can fix very quickly.
Yeah.
Southern countryside landscape day. The sun shines down on a small wetland. Some trees are mirrored. A modest log cabin is seen in the distance over a hill. Smoke is coming out of its chimney. Red's cabin, patio day. Brandy Red, a pretty blonde and young Southern girl in her 20s, struggles to exit a hut with a wicker laundry basket full of damp clothes. Her natural fit figure moves with harmony in her cowboy boots. She drops the basket to the ground and begins hanging clothes on the line. Brandy ignores her father and continues with her business. Brandy sighs, moving her gaze to the cabin as she hangs a pair of men's long johns underwear.
What do you want? I'm busy.
I don't give a shit what you're doing. I'm hungry. The Red's cabin day, dining room. Mr. Red, a 55-year-old man with an upset face, is seated next to the dining table. Duke, Brandy's brother, a 19-year-old guy, is also seated there. The cooking area can be seen from behind the table next to an antique wood stove. There are old iron cookware hung on the wall.
Okay, so first off, really nice descriptive opening. You know, I think that you're kind of setting the scene really well. I was a little bit thrown by the some trees are mirrored line. I'm left thinking, are they mirrored in the sense that they multiple trees that look the same, or are they literally mirrored trees? And we're looking at some sort of strange sci-fi world. Again, it's a small thing, but like, you've thrown me immediately. And I don't know, and now I'm thinking sci-fi, so you're going to set up an expectation that maybe you didn't want to. Try and rework that line.
The character description of Brandy is pretty strong. You know, Brandy Red, a pretty blonde and young Southern girl in her 20s. We get an idea of what she's wearing, what she looks like, what she's doing. So I thought it was good.
Yeah. The first red flag for me was the Brandy ignores her father. Now it's something we brought up before with Omid's script as well. We are meant to be watching this, remember, so we can't possibly know that information. I would consider losing it entirely, and when we introduce Mr. Red later, we identify him as her father.
Yeah. I would also say how you introduced Duke is perfect.
Bracketed, yeah.
In terms of bracketing him, I would just do the same for the dad.
Yeah, and I like, just to say, I like the description of the cabin. It's modest, it's nice work. I would consider ironing out some of the character descriptions a little, as they read a little vague at the minute. Upset face, for instance, as we read there with the father. I mean, is he upset sad? Is he upset angry? I think this upset face can be extremely, you know, vague and open-ended. So I think just try and be a little cleaner there.
Yeah.
Brandy enters the residence. Are we supposed to wait all day for you?
Yeah, are we supposed to wait all day for you?
Red's cabin, kitchen. Brandy goes to the kitchen and starts wearing an apron. She's irritated. These two son of bitches are lazier than a sloth going down to shit. On two metal dishes, she begins to serve food that appears to be mashed potatoes. It's so thick that she's having trouble getting it off the enormous wooden spoon. Cut to Red's cabin dining room. With one plate in each hand, Brandy approaches the table and she tosses the dishes, one in front of each of them, Mr. Red and Duke. Here you go, enjoy. Mr. Red and Duke take a look at their plates, then at each other, and finally at Brandy.
What the hell is this shit? You call this food? We're not in jail.
Yeah, we're not in jail.
Well, if you two want to eat meat, you're going to have to get extra money. Cows don't grow on trees. You know that. The repetitive dialogue in this is a nice touch in the first instance. Again, an error slightly, a capitalized letter. It just looks like a copy and paste. So I would just clean it up. Is something that can, so he wants to be reinforced. I assume we want to reinforce the fact that he's very similar to his father, or wants to be like his father. We can maybe enforce this in his mannerisms or the way he dresses. I think it'd be nice to be a little clearer in terms of description or action lines.
I think
that exchange would play off.
Yeah,
that exchange would pay off better. So it's definitely something. Another thing with Duke's line, again, sorry, I wrote a note on it, but yeah, it was the fact that the R is the capitalized A. So just clean it up.
Again, I would say the action lines are doing a really good job of conveying the life and circumstance of these characters. My one note so far, again, back to the sci-fi one, I don't know, but I have absolutely no idea what if this is, what time period we're in. If this is a period piece, is this modern day? I don't know. And I think that there has to be some work done there to kind of figure that out.
Yeah. So basically, oh yeah, sorry, and you probably don't need the bracketed names here. The Mr. Red and Duke, which one in front of each of them. It's inferred. You can lose that. It's just economy on the page, and isn't necessary. Because we already know who's in the scene. So the log line is Brandy's father wants to kill her lover when he learns that she became pregnant, but something unexpected makes him change his mind, and it's a comedy.
Okay, so that reading the log line after reading these 2 pages for Chris and I, that was a big thing that has had an impact on our final thoughts as well. My biggest question mark here on this piece is, what is this story about? We've met the protagonist and we've seen her life, but I have absolutely no idea what to know beyond that. Get to the core concept, especially as this is a short, the log line, much quicker. If she's pregnant, why do we not know any of that information, even subtly early on?
Yeah. At the moment, Duke reads a little bit like a caricature and less of a real character. I think that the character description that can go a long way in terms of fixing it, or the mentioned the mannerisms and, like we said, clothing, setting the scene in general. Yeah, rather than just having him parrot his father, that's not clear.
My other thing would be that the opening scene should be intriguing enough to make us want to read further. It doesn't have to be a big action scene or even full of drama, but it should be interesting enough to grab hold of me as a reader and make me want to keep reading. You want something that will hook us right away. And from this, I don't know, as I mentioned, I didn't get the genre at all. I didn't know the tone of this story. And I certainly didn't get comedy. Despite there being, because a lot of the dialogue, it may have been comedic, but the way it came across was more dramatic.
Yeah,
it was more yeah.
Well, whatever the genre is, it needs to be communicated quickly in the first opening pages. Particularly on a short, it needs to be in the first or second page. That's what's going to get your reader in a particular mood to read the screenplay.
Exactly.
And write for the reader.
The faster they know the genre, the quicker they'll set their expectations for what's to come.
Yeah. So congrats on getting it through and finishing. Yeah, just clean particularly those elements up. Okay, and so right. Well, so I'm just going to take a 2-3 minute break quickly. Just going to go use the bathroom, and we can jump back on the final one. I don't want to pop out in the middle of it. So Okay. Yep. So, Nightcrawler. I hope everyone is familiar with it. If you haven't read it, please read it. It is a fantastic script. Similarly, a very good movie. But economically speaking, probably a prime example of what do you call it? Writing for 10 pages, hooking reads.
Apologies if you haven't seen the film. We will be spoiling the first 10 pages, which probably about the first 10 minutes of the film for you.
Yeah, but it was released in 2014, so that's on you if you haven't seen it.
Do you want to put it up?
Yep, let me grab it.
And to be honest, actually, as an exercise, reading either of the Gilroy brothers' scripts, I think is a great thing.
Okay.
You get it?
Yeah, one sec. Sorry. There we go. See that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So
okay, do you want me to take the first page?
Yeah, sure. No, I can take it. I'll take it. So Infinity of Stars. Over barren ground, if not for a billboard, it could be the moon. Camera pushing over a rim to show Los Angeles. Shimmering in night heat, thrum of civilization. A freeway feeds into the city as a semi blasts by and cut to the city. Seen closer now, Oz-like and magical, and cut to postcard views of Los Angeles. Inside the city now, Beverly Hills framed against mountains, looking down from Mulholland Boulevard. Boulevard lights like strings of pearls, desert clarity, and cut to the LA River. Flows darkly before us. Camera rising above a flood channel to a fenced industrial area where Lou Bloom is a silhouette. It is a silhouette against the city glow, using bolt cutters to rip down a square of chain-like fence, muscling it into the back of a beat-up car as he hears something. Turns to see headlights approaching in the distance. Lou slamming a trunk in as the lights sweep, and we see him. Lou's 30, pure primal id. If there's music in it's in his head. Disconnected, feral, driven by dollar signs and a dream of some imagined Eden as a pickup truck stops and a man gets out, framed in headlights, wearing a utility belt with mace and handcuffs. What are you doing out here?
I'm lost. Okay, so this first page, this is setting the scene for the screenplay and the thematic heart of the film. As we will learn later, our protagonist Lou is always looking for something bigger and better, and LA offers just that. Described as Oz-like and magical is a brief description, but it lends itself to that idea. This film wouldn't be the same if it was done in Kansas, excuse the pun.
Yep. Equally, we're also reminded of the thrum of civilization, and that the LA is a place where one person can pretty quickly become lost.
Yeah, and I think also if we look at the two paragraphs next, postcard views and the LA River, these two paragraphs tell us that LA has the glitz, but also the dark underbelly. And the dark underbelly is exactly where we will end up finding Lou.
I mean, Dan Gilroy is a great writer, probably one of the best. But he breaks rules in this script, and very similar to John's example. It shows how to do it the right way and allow the reader to picture the film. So it really doesn't matter. In this example, we're not lost as to where we are, which I think you can see as a cleaner example. So if you look at headlights as an example, there are no slugs, but the time of day has been established through earlier description, the shimmering in the night heat. So again, John might be a prime example to have a read through and lean into this example as as a positive example as to how to correctly do it, or to do it to the in a stronger way, particularly make it more visual. The words here further down, disconnected, feral, driven. Although they're not visually descriptive, they're more of his physicality. They do give us a sense of his character and his mannerisms. So we're already early on page 1. We're already building a character description or picture of what Lou is, or who Lou is, in our heads.
Yeah, and I think the first line that Lou says in the script, "I'm lost," is brilliant. It's powerful in both describing Lou's character and his problem. But equally in this moment, it also works as a perfect excuse as to why he's trespassing.
Yeah.
We'll go through. You want me to read it?
I can read it. So this is a restricted area.
I didn't know that. There's no signs.
They're everywhere. Let's see some ID.
Why?
Because there's a broken gate back there and you're trespassing.
Excuse me, but that gate was open, sir. I was under the opinion that it was a detour. What kind of uniform is that?
I'll ask the fucking questions. Lou, seeing a security emblem on the man's sleeve.
Private outfit, huh? I tried to get one of those jobs. I like guarding things, pulling a license. Here you go, sir. I think what happened is I must have gotten turned around.
Man reaches for Lou's license, and close on, a chunky watch on the man's wrist. Minute hand ticking, 1:19 a.m. as Lou attacks. Fight going to ground. Dust rising into the headlights, and cut to Lou's car, gliding along the endless valley boulevard. Shut stores and deserted parking lots. Streetlights on every empty corner, like a movie set waiting for the next day's shooting. Lou's hand shifts on the steering wheel, and as he admires the guard's watch on his wrist, industrial roar bleeding in, and cut to.
Okay, so if you just go up a little bit, Chris.
Sorry.
Here, Lou, from this exchange here, we can see that Lou's a little bit strange and possibly even sociopathic, but we also will end up growing to like him in a weird, morbid kind of way. You may often hear screenwriting gurus, or if you've read books on it, talking about the importance of a sympathetic character. And what that means in short is likability.
Yeah. So in this early, albeit strange encounter, we have Lou presented as a traditionally associated as likability, because he's polite. When he says, "Excuse me, but that gate was open, sir." But as we learn, the trait also has a chilling undertone, because as the movie progresses, Lou begins to threaten people with the same calm and polite manner, much like a serial killer.
Yeah, and if you see just that last moment, Lou attacks, this is a really good thing on page 2, because when describing Lou, if we remember, Gilroy chose the term pure primal id. And sure enough, when he's backed into a corner, he reacted with a primitive, basic, and fully unconscious part of his personality. So that attack speaks to his character description, as it contains all of the unconscious energy that is directed toward fulfilling a person's most basic need. He does what we are told he would do. He lives up to that.
Yeah. You can take this page.
Okay, a giant machine eating cars at the edge of the valley, night crew craning junkers into grinding blades as, inside the office, Lou speaks to the scrapyard owner over the noise. I guesstimate I have 50 pounds of copper wire, 100 pounds of chain link, and 2 manhole covers, the nice thick ones.
I'll give you 50 cents a pound for the wire, 15 for the fence, and 10 for the covers.
That's below market value.
Market value? You know, the cops came by asking about manhole covers.
I'd like to counter $1 a pound for the copper, 30 cents a pound for the fence, and 20 cents per for the covers.
Sell them somewhere else.
I feel good at 75, 25, 15.
I'm not negotiating with you.
I think we're close.
We're done. Take it or leave it.
I'm willing to take less to establish a business relationship. If that's your best offer, then I guess I accept.
Drive around back and unload them. So likability, as we discussed earlier, is not a guarantee of audience involvement. Really, it's just merely an aspect of characterization, in particular in this instance.
Yeah, and I think it's the deeper character that audiences will ultimately connect with, which brings us to empathy. So, not to go on too much about screenwriting gurus and stuff, Chris, you've gone a bit weird there.
Oh, apologies. Oh, jumped
But
off. There you go.
yeah, as Robert McKee told us, the audience's emotional involvement in a film or a story is held by the glue of empathy.
Yeah. We empathize with the character. We understand the motives behind their actions. Despite disagreeing with the choice, we also know why it was made. So in this particular example, Lou, desperate in 2 instances, we've just met him, gives us an understanding that he is forced into this scenario.
Yeah, and when we meet Lou, he's trespassing, stealing, and attacking a security guard. But in this scene, we get a sense of his situation and where he's coming from. So we start to understand the motives behind his actions. We see Lou is in need of money, and that he's a little strange. And that with the very next line on the next scene, he says, "I'm looking for a job." So he's also searching for fulfillment as well.
Sir, excuse me, I'm looking for a job. In fact, I've made my mind up. I've made up my mind to find a career I can learn and grow into. Who am I? I'm a hard worker. I set goals. I set high goals, and I'm told I'm persistent. Now, I'm not fooling myself, sir. Having been raised with the self-esteem movement, popular.
Scrapyard of filling out a form, muttering no.
How about an internship then? A lot of young people are looking for unpaid positions to get a foot in the door. That's something I'd be willing to do.
I'm not hiring a fucking thief.
Dead of night, Lou sits alone in his car driving an LA freeway, windows down, clock blinking, 3:44 a.m., ad on the radio. Lou sees an accident up ahead, passes, 2 highway patrolmen trying to pull out an unconscious woman from a blazing car, and Lou angles to the shoulder, getting out to look as the police helicopter searchlight stabs the dark. Lou drawn to the scene, there's a big panel van on the shoulder, and so spoiler alert, unless you haven't already discovered it, Lou is not a conventional hero. In fact, he's probably best described as an anti-hero. Yet he remains the hero of the story. Why? Well, we tend to like characters who have traits that we find admirable: generosity, humility, confidence, honesty. But the idea that protagonists must be nice or morally flawless is definitely a misconception. If we look at another couple ways that Dan Gilroy creates empathy for Lou.
Yeah, so Lou describes himself in that sequence that we've highlighted as a hard worker. And this little piece of dialogue is also further demonstrated later in the film. Again, it's plant and payoff that we see a lot with Gilroy's work, where he will learn his new job through hard work. And in the monologue as well, we find that Lou will do whatever it takes to succeed. So these traits are both impressive and respectable, and perhaps most importantly in the case of this anti-hero character, separate from morality. So Gilroy has made a morally questionable character likable.
Yeah. So knowing all we know about Lou's character in this instance and his situation, we now understand why he's so taken by this car crash scene. Page 4, and we already know our character, and we now have an inciting incident. So when we talk about economy, particularly on pages, this is a prime example of getting straight to the point. This change, of course, that will set him on his new journey. We talk about setting it up quick, and this is exactly how we should do it.
Yeah, let's go on page 5. Okay, 2 men jump out, one in charge, tough and indifferent, the other an employee. Both wear shirts with a logo that reads Mayhem Video. The man in charge, Joe Loader, carrying a professional camcorder and filming as the employee yells, "We're first."
Got a view in the front. I got a view in the car.
And then film the cops trying to free the woman in the burning car as Lou looks inside their van and sees a dozen scanners, blinking and blaring emergency comm chatter, 2 laptops set to GPS, Los Angeles crime and tragedy tracked on high-def screens and surround sound. 4. Lou, the effect is electrifying. A police chopper banks low and the cops smash glass and the camera guys film as an SUV skids to a stop and a man and woman jump out and film, and Lou looks inside the SUV and regards an array of emergency scanners and laptops, and cut to. You see, even in that instances, we're getting, quick action. I think that we talk about economy a lot, but this is the way that Dan Gilroy has written this is to induce really fast pacing. So where you sometimes get scored on your scripts for pacing, it's for moments like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in the first 10 pages, no action line or dialogue should be throwaways. So everything should carry meaning. And if we look at the dialogue exchange, Chris, if you go up, it's an important piece of information, as our main character, Lou, will ultimately learn that 1, he needs to be first to the scene in order to get the footage, and 2, he always will have to push for the best footage in any way. So those 2 moments, while they're, a lot of people could see them as throwaway lines, they're not. They are important to the narrative and to our main character and what he's learning. Like
all good screenplays, we have every element of dialogue has to lean to the narrative of the story, or should at least attempt to. This is a prime example of like Mike said, 2 throwaway lines that mean so much in terms of the action required for Lou to take, and this moment of him going on his hero's journey and the beginning of his adventure, and what is inevitably required.
A dozen scanners, I think, is an important note as well.
Yeah, again, a dozen scanners. Lou's basically seen the tools he needs to set about on his job. Remember, everything has meaning and driving the story forward to a logical conclusion. So we are basically giving the audience, both the audience and Lou, understand every element that is required in order to take this job on, and Lou thrusts himself in and takes accepts the call to adventure, as it were.
And if you haven't picked up already, the line for Lou, the effect is electrifying. This is a line that tells us it's like a child waking up at Christmas, and Lou is presented with a world that is exciting, and this action line emphasizes the effect it has on his character. If you watch the film, he actually glances up at the police choppers almost in awe.
Yeah.
On page 6.
10 minutes later,
camera crews have been shunted from the wreck, filming the departure of wailing ambulance. Action over. They head to their vehicles. Lou following Joe Loader.
Excuse me, will this be on TV?
Morning news.
What channel?
Whoever pays the most.
What do you get for something like this?
Not much.
Enough to buy you all that gear.
It's a flaming job.
How do you sell what you shoot?
Joe ignoring him, loading the equipment in the van.
Can I ask you, are you currently hiring?
No.
Well, thank you for taking the time to discuss what you do. You've been very helpful.
211 on Rosecrans in progress. They jump in the van and leave, SUV following as Lou stands by the smoking car, traffic passing, police stringing yellow tape around the crash site, and cut to. Okay. You have a note on this one, Chris?
Yeah. So in this example, dialogue has to carry meaning, but it also has to be natural. So one of the best ways to write natural dialogue is for 2 characters never to be on the same page. I use example when we talked about witches. As this is real life, people generally talk over each other and they think about what they're going to say rather than actually listen. Here, Lou doesn't hear negatives. He's just purely driven by the positives of his new goal. So it's a great example of that. A great example of strong dialogue. Orange glow against the anthracite sky, night black tinting day blue as the rim of the sun crests the mountains, ringing Los Angeles. Light strikes patch fog carpeting the basin, angles to a black ocean. We're looking at the west of 1 million years ago, and cut to a forest of high gain antennas, raising hundreds of feet above the peak of Mount Wilson, every TV and radio station broadcasting up from here, and the sound of competing manic morning TV news themes filters in. A symphonic jumble of bass-heavy opuses that as we cut to a satellite dish on the roof of a crappy Lego block, a LA apartment complex set amid LA poverty sprawl. The cable is spliced into the TV box with duct tape as we follow the pirated cable down the wall. Medley of morning TV news themes reduced to a single soaring score as we follow the cable into Lou's apartment. One shitty room, near empty and neat, perfectly made bed, a few pressed shirts hanging on a pipe, an old computer, Lou watering a weedy plant on the windowsill, watching a TV set on the milk crate as the LA morning news show begins.
Yeah,
high
so
definition.
we don't do that bit.
Okay. Yeah.
So on this page here, pulling out a few of the descriptions, we've got LA poverty sprawl. Chris, you're all over the place, man.
Sorry.
Go down.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
there
you go. Okay.
That's it.
LA poverty sprawl. We've got near empty apartment. We've got perfectly made bed, TV on a milk crate, one shitty room. All of this speaks deeply to Lou's character and gives us a deeper sense of his world. And it's only page 7. So you see this as two other films that did this really well. Was Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, when he went back to his trailer and you see kind of how he lives, and also Rocky as well. Stallone Rocky. You find that they describe their living environment and we get to understand their character through their living environment. I think that's really important.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Delgado.
And I'm Brennan Clark. An unclaimed Mega Million ticket sold at 7-Eleven in San Diego is worth a whopping $266 million. Is it yours?
Lou changing to another AM news show with older anchors. It's been a week since Officer Michael Haley was gunned down. New evidence and police hunting for their own for one of their own.
A fast-moving bank robber in Silmar didn't move fast enough, and we'll explain how the FBI caught up with him.
Lou changing channels to 2 caffeinated news anchors. A landmark court decision. Carl has cyber music fans singing the blues.
Ouch. I might have a new budget for, I might have to budget more for my music.
Lou changing channels to another LA hairsprayed anchors. Oh, okay.
Let's just give the note on that page. A dialogue exchange. Chris, the dialogue exchange on page 8.
Yes. So while reading this part, it's actually quite clear that how much Dan Gilroy knows about the subject. Nightcrawler life, news crews, police codes, things like that. He did his research and it shows, so it feels godly authentic. And I think it's important, particularly when you're using any prime example of instances like this. You want to know as much as you can about the world you're immersing yourself in.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that, you can get a lot of research online now, so there's no excuse to not know your worlds intimately. And I think that that's one thing. Obviously, like Chris and I are writing a World War I piece right now, and I've got books galore that I'm researching for that. So it's like you have to really know the worlds that you're doing, because then your piece will feel
authentic.
And I think that's what he does really well here. Do you want to pull right down page 10, Chris, because that's where we had our last night.
A pawn shop. Lou showing the bike to the owner. I don't know. I'll give you 500.
This is a custom racing bicycle, sir, designed for competitive road cycling. This bike has a lightweight space-age carbon frame and handlebars positioned to put the rider in a more aerodynamic posture. It also has micro shifters and 37 gears and weighs under 6 pounds. I won Tour de Mexico on this bike.
700. High as I'll go.
It cost me over 8,000 new.
700.
2,500, and that's giving it away.
No bike's got 37 gears.
2,000.
Nope.
Could I please speak with your boss, please?
I'm the owner.
How about 800 in store credit?
What are you looking for?
Camcorder and a police scanner.
So here we learn in this particular example, let me just jump back in there. Lou is a great salesman. He thinks on his feet, he's intelligent, but you also see that he is a chronic liar. He's very quick to change when he's found out and tends to lead, and this lends itself to a sociopathic character, which we get off the bat, which is what we learn from the feature, from the film anyway, but we're already instilling this in both the reader and the, in terms of the film, the viewer. Again, he'll do just about anything he can to get his goal, just like he said he would. So it's a prime example of the strength of character within 10 pages.
Can you scroll down to that final one, Chris? Because with the final line, a camcorder and a police scanner, we see what he has come for. And that one line sets up the entire film. So page 10, we have the line of dialogue that puts us into the rest of our story. There is a sense of urgency here and a desire to turn the page, and we're invested in Lou's journey, even if we think he's morally, not quite there. Wherever he wants to go, we're going to go with him. I would say, final notes on this script. This is a non-standard script, right? There are no scene headings. Descriptions are streamlined into the fabric of the piece. A bit like, obviously, John, you had the same. These scenes fade into one another, creating for the reader a sense of kind of inevitability that's crafted by the protagonist. Of course, Dan Gilroy did direct this movie, so that does help. But he has found a way to tell the story on the page that allows the reader to play the movie in their head.
Yeah. 10 pages, and we've basically learned about the protagonist in a deep way. We've seen their everyday life before a catalyst of events sets them off on a new and exciting journey. It is, for all intents and purposes, a almost perfect 10 pages in terms of character introduction, theme, setting up story, every crucial element you can expect from a screenplay. It has. So it's a prime example that we should all look to do in terms of crafting and creating economy, especially within our first 10 pages.
Again, I think on that note, though, just quickly, if you want to know how to craft 10 pages well, reading produced scripts is one of the best ways. The more you become a voracious reader and read as much as you can. A lot of scripts now are available online through different websites and everything, so you don't have to pay for it really anymore. You should be able to find most of them, especially around Oscar season. All of the Oscar scripts are released, so make sure you read them, look at what they do, analyze them in the same way Chris and I have done here, and you start to see why things work the way they do. And then obviously the next step is to implement it.
Short of that ends the session.
Thank you for staying with us, by the way.
Really apologies, because we really went on. We like to talk, so hopefully all of you enjoyed it and took something from it. For those of you that are watching it on a rerun of it, if you, as I said before, if you have, or John, I know you're still here, if you want to grab a copy of the highlighted version, we're happy to send it through, but we'll make the link available to everybody shortly.
And finally, as well, I just want to say as well, congratulations to everyone for getting this far in the competition. It's no mean feat to get in, semi-finalist, finalist stages of competition, so really well done for that.
So thank you, guys. Best of luck, keep writing, and take care.
Speak soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye.